Hi there, everyone. My name is Neha, and welcome to Dropping Your Armor, where we listen to stories from thinkers, doers, and dreamers in the hope of unlocking our infinite human potential. Today, we're going to do something different and start from the end, or rather the middle, right before intermission. Before we get to know my amazing guest, Hannah Teutscher, let's listen to a real turning point in her life. A story that made me understand her values and philosophy better than any conversation could have. Pina Bausch, the famous German dancer and choreographer, once said, "I'm not interested in how people move, but what moves them." And this story moved me.
Every dancer has like a piece of choreography that draws them in, where you look at that piece of choreography, the movement language, and you know, like, this is a full expression of who I am as a person. I feel free in this movement. And so I finally got that. There was a piece called Cantata, and I finally got the opportunity to dance this piece in Staatstheater Nuremberg Ballet. And right around that time, I started experiencing a little bit of pain in my hip, and I had gone to a couple of doctors, but it's very hard to get a doctor appointment that fits around your rehearsal time and your dance and when your performances are. And so I remember I was getting ready for the premiere of this piece called, and I was one of the soloists that was in there. So it is a very, like, the women are in the forefront of this piece. It's like a nitty gritty, powerful. God, I can't even explain what that is. It's like your soul roars. It is such a great piece. And so now, to back up, I had been experiencing pain in my hip and finally had a appointment with a dance specialist, and I go in the morning of the premiere because that was the only time that they could come and where I could get in there. And so I had to call my rehearsal director and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to have to be a little bit late for my ballet class in the morning because I need to go to this appointment," which he was so angry about, but he understood, like, it has to get done, right? So, which is like, you never miss a dance class, especially not on the day of a premiere. So I go in and I'm explaining the pain to my doctor, and the doctor says, "Oof, we need an x-ray right now." And I said, "Okay." Like, still not, not really thinking of anything, because they do a lot of x-rays, especially if you're a professional. And so I go in and get the x-ray. He looks at it right away and he said, "How are you walking?" And I was like, what do you mean?" He said, "Your hip looks like it's like you're 70 years old. Like, there are holes in the bones. Like, what is going on?" So he had a moment. He's like, "You can't dance today. Like, what?" And he was really super concerned. And I'm still at this point, I'm just like, I got a performance in a little bit. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's fine. And so I called my rehearsal director back and I said, "Look, it's going to be a little bit longer than I expected." Didn't tell him anything. And the doctor then called over to the next specialist and said, "This lady needs an MRI. I think they call them MRTs here, today." So I went from getting the x-ray straight over to go get the MRT. They did the MRT. Again, mind you, that all of the dance company is now rehearsing and they're getting ready for the show. So we did the MRT, and the the doctor said, "Go straight back to that your orthopedic." So I went back with the results in my hand, and my original doctor said, "This is the end of your career. You are not allowed to go on stage. Like, this is," he's like, "you need to have, here's crutches. Please do not put any weight. We don't know if this is necrosis, so that if the joint is stable enough that you won't lose out, like, the whole bone structure won't collapse on you." Um, so he gave me crutches. I called my boss, and I said, "Sorry, I missed the rehearsal, but I'll be there for the show." At this point, my husband, well, that my boyfriend at that point, is also in the dance company with me. And I knew that it was getting close to him having his break to come back in between. This is probably about like 2 o'clock in the afternoon by that point. And I didn't want him, because he also had a premiere. All of my friends also have the premiere, right? So I didn't want him to see or know what was going on. So I convinced the doctor. I said, look, I have to do this performance tonight. I must be on stage. There is not enough time to change this group of people because my cast is ready to go. And I was a soloist in it. So I had a duet with two other, it was actually a trio with two other men. And so this is a real big highlight for them as well. It's a very, very time intensive piece. You can't just switch out someone. So I walked out and I said to my doctor, you can start the Krankenschein. You can start this, like the doctor's note from tomorrow, but today I need to dance. So he gave me the crutches and I walked home with them and I hid them in the closet. So my boyfriend, now my husband, comes in. How did it go? And I was like, oh, it's fine. I'll be fine. So I didn't tell him anything. I went in, then you have another dance, like a shorter warm up, and then you go on stage. And at that point I'm thinking, because I had seen the pictures, and I knew in that moment that he was right. Like that was the end. That would be the last performance I ever do. But I didn't tell anyone at that point because I didn't want to rob other people of that freedom and joy that is the stage, that is the premiere. I didn't want for them to treat me any different during that moment, because the charisma, the magic, the way that you partner on stage has to do with trust. And I didn't want them to, for a second, not trust me. So I went onto stage and there was two pieces in that night. One was I was also a soloist in it, and I got to improvise as a soloist. And it was like time slowed down. Like I don't have words to describe what it's like, but you are aware of every muscle, and you have control, and you're hearing the music, and it's like there is an eternity between each space of the notes. And there's this nothing other than magic that's happening. And then I performed that, and then but with so much pain. There was the deafening of the pain that's there, and then this magic that was happening at the same time. And then and then the second piece is this cantata piece, and I gave everything. I left it all on the stage. It wasn't a perfect performance, and that's not what matters, but it was I am so present in this moment. And it was the most beautiful performance I've ever been able to do because of that rawness of it. And I don't remember much other than that, than those couple moments. I walked off stage. I told my director what had happened, and I said, I'm out, for at least a few months, not really wanting to say what it really was happening. And then I thanked my dance partners and let them know. And that was the end of my dance career.
I'm sure now you're all eager to know more about her life and her relation to movement today. So let's rewind and learn more about Hannah Teutscher. As a former professional ballet dancer, Hannah's career brought her throughout the US, Canada, Japan, Portugal, and finally Germany. As a current movement teacher, Hannah is passionate about infusing her joy of movement and fitness to inspire, challenge, and motivate her students to reach their full potential. She owns and runs Performance Fit Pilates, an excellent Pilates studio in Nuremberg, which has become my place of bliss in the city. Hannah is a lifestyle medicine advocate and also a qualified fitness specialist for people with neurological conditions such as Parkinson's and MS. In this episode, Hannah and I reflect on the impact of dance and movement in our lives and how movement helps connect our minds and bodies and unlock new ways of thinking and feeling about ourselves and the world around us. We hope this episode inspires you to think about how movement, in line with your own needs and abilities, can help you tear down your own armors and connect to your own authentic self. Hope you enjoy it. So, hey, Hannah, welcome to Dropping Your Armor. Thank you so much for taking the time today. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, and thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you guys today. It's really exciting.
Yes. Um, I've been, I've actually been really wanting to get you on this, on the podcast because, for very selfish reasons, to be very honest. People who know me very well know that, and I might make you feel uncomfortable saying this, so be prepared. But joining your classes this year was the best thing that I did for myself this year, and I tell that to people when they talk to me, and and they ask me like, what's been going on, and it's really been super impactful, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you because this topic about movement is very close to my heart, and I find your philosophy and your way of going about it really inspiring, and yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, and thank you so much. And let's start off with getting me crying. Yeah, that's perfect.
It's
No,
called
I
dropping
really.
your armor. It's not going to be easy.
Oh man, let's go straight to the big stuff. No, no, that really touches me. Thank you for that so much.
So, Hannah, do you want to take a minute to maybe introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, so my name is Hannah Teutscher. I'm a former dancer, and I own a Pilates studio, yoga studio, movement studio, I think is what is better described at. And we help people feel better in their bodies. Like that's my mission in life. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And we'll go into that more. And I have a ton of questions for you, Hannah. But before we do, we always start with a tune in, a check in, right? And I've got a question for you. What was your obsession in childhood? What was the thing where you were like completely crazy about, like lost yourself and lost all concept of time and space when you were doing it, and you're just completely obsessed by?
Well, I mean, this probably doesn't come as any surprise with my intro before, but I was completely obsessed with dancing. But like from the beginning of my day to at the end of every single day, completely obsessed with that. That means that I went to sleep with when I was young, my little tutu on. I would put my feet in my point shoes. I'd go to sleep with my point shoes. Every Halloween, that was the only thing that I wanted to be, was a ballerina. Um, every birthday wish was about becoming a dancer. So I would call that an obsession for sure.
I love that. So we're going to get along perfectly in this because that's also true for me. I was obsessed with dancing. I watched every episode of So You Think You Can Dance. I was always moving. I'd lock my door
Yeah.
and, have these little, when I had these little bursts of energy, I just put on the music really loud and just start dancing randomly. And it was exhilarating. I kind of lost that connection in the middle, but which is why I say that coming to your classes was one of the best things that I did for myself this year because I feel like I'm regaining that connection with that childhood self of mine. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into this topic in a moment, but I think finding that relationship to that playfulness of like when you're a kid and you're completely obsessed with something, and in our case, it's movement and dancing, but I think all children, given the space and the freedom to be able to explore that in their bodies, I think most children would also be obsessed with that sort of playfulness. And I think you're absolutely right. Like we move away from that as we're moving into adulthood and coming back to it, I think is the most joyful thing we could, the biggest gift we could ever give ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the topics that I want to unpack with you more in detail. But maybe before we get started with that, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your philosophy, how you see movement, and where does it actually come from?
Ooh, how do I see movement? Um, I think that every human body has a limitless potential in it. And the way that we think about ourselves sometimes is where the limitations come in. So my philosophy with every person that comes into my studio, and what I'd like for people to tap into in my classes, is finding that limitless potential in there. And I think that sounds a little bit funny. Unless you've experienced it before, and the vastness that's there is just incredible. I think that in this, like, right now in our society, like, there's more vastness in the digital world. Like, the digital world is expanding and expanding, and our physical capacities are shrinking. And my passion is to expand that physical world, because I think that our physicality and our mental state, are, as humans, our mental state, our spiritual side, are all related into that physical realm that we have. So I like to tap into that hopefully in a different way, in my way. Yeah.
But tell me more about your way, and like how did this emerge for you? I want to know kind of your origin story of how you came to work in this area, movement. Why is this your passion?
Dance dance has given me a voice when I wasn't able to have words. And I think that was throughout my entire life has been like that. I think when I was a child, I really struggled to express myself. I still do as an adult. And dance and physicality gave me the tools that I need to go explore things, explore the way that I feel, explore my relationships with maybe people, how I can be in a room even with other people, because then I started to look at maybe the dynamics of how people move, and the gestures, and the mimic. And I think that all becomes like this dance of life, if we want to get like super metaphorical in there. The joy and the freedom of that flow, finding that flow, is what I would like people to experience for themselves. And so my philosophy, my mission is to develop, um, maybe not class structures, but to create space for people to feel safe enough that they can experience that for themselves without having to, produce a dance step. It's not about that at all. But the freedom, dance afforded me that freedom. And I believe that we could all find that freedom through our physicality.
That so resonates with me because um, one of the reasons I was so into dance, and I had school which started at like 7 o'clock in the morning to like 3 p.m., and then
Yeah.
from 4 o'clock to 6:30 I'd go to dance every single day, and then on weekends for like 6 hours, and I was just so into it because
Yeah.
I think it made me feel really powerful. When I was in the studio, I
Yes.
was I didn't have those limitations. So I understand what you're saying because I could control I had control in that moment. I could use my body to express my emotions. I could use it to do incredible things. And I felt so powerful. It was addictive.
Right. Right. And I think we tap into this, like, for lack of a better word, like a flow. We tap into a flow state when we're dancing, or when we're doing any sort of unstructured play, like dancing, maybe improvisation, or maybe like jazz music has the same sort of thing, that we get into a type of creativity where we override all of the other things, all of those negative thoughts, maybe, or the inhibitions that would make us say, oh, I'm the shy person, I can't go into this, or maybe my idea isn't good enough, and you stop yourself from expressing it. When we're in that dance mode or that improvisation mode, you override all of that. And I think that's where your true self comes out. And that's where that confidence feels like that unlimited um, vastness of
Yeah.
creativity.
And why do you
Is that how you? I'm
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
Is that sort of what you were describing? That
Yes, yes,
feeling
100%.
when you were a
And you
kid?
know, like if
Yeah.
you read all of my report cards as a kid, it says that I was a really shy kid. I was smart, but I was really shy. I wouldn't speak up in class. I had problems like standing in front of class and saying things, but I had no problem standing at the stage and performing. Like it was incredible, right? There was like a complete shift of personality, confidence level, self esteem when I was on a
Yeah.
stage, which is incredible. But why do you think, Hannah, that these engaging with our physical bodies, moving, dance, be it improvisation, all of those experiences gives us the permission to be limitless and vast and show up as our true selves, as you say. I really resonate with that, and just curious as to how that happens.
How that happened? Well, I think I think it's a process, right? So it's not, maybe for some lucky people they'll go into a dance class or a movement class or a yoga practice, and they will already be able to inhabit that in their bodies. But for a lot more people, I think it's a process of, you know, for it fits perfectly for you guys, but like tearing down the armor of your own preconceived notions of who you need to be in the space around yourself. So a lot of the times we are carrying gestures, we're carrying the ways that we move in the world because we've either been taught them or society said that they're really important. As a woman has to look like this, a man needs to do this, a young person needs to do this. And so those are types of physicality that we are wearing almost like a
Yeah.
costume. And when we can break those down, or not even perhaps break them down, but to add more repertoire into our movement, I think we get closer to being able to be who we really are. I really do think that the mind, who you are, like deep, deep, deep in, is a physical, is closer to your physicality, right? Like there's a lot of times that we always talk about the mind body connection, but I think that's too, there's too much duality in it, is mind and body. I really think that they are together. Um, and it's a process of getting out of the way.
Yeah. I'm curious though, Hannah, how did that sort of manifest in your story, in your life? Like, if you don't mind sharing, right? How did you find
Yeah.
your true self through dance?
I think it's an always coming back to their true self. There's time. It's not like always I was in touch with everything. It is a process of showing up and practicing over and over and over, and noticing when you're drifting away and coming back into it. And I think the practice is the important part of it. So we always like, in as a professional dancer, you have a ballet class every day of your life. Like pretty much. I mean, sometimes we get a day off, but you're going in and you're doing the most basic elements of dance. You do your plies, then you do your tendus, which is basically like flossing your teeth, right? It's so routine with what you're doing. And coming back to that every single time gets you closer to um, who you are. You have to be more honest in that because you're doing it so often. So there's the mix of that, like routine, and the absolute freedom to express yourself. And you kind of need both in a consistent fashion to be able to play and find find who you are in there. Um, I was always a bit of a rule breaker. I've gotten kicked out of so many dance classes, I can't even tell you. Because there's also, you're not surprised, you know me well. It's a rule breaker because there's also a hierarchy in dance, which it never sat well with me. So whenever I had the opportunity to sort of knock that down a little bit, I always took that opportunity. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not so good. Maybe.
Is there a story there?
Ooh. I have to think about how not to use explicit words. Let's see.
We can have some beeps in here.
Okay, you might want to beep this one out. There was one time when I was a teenager. So this is more about rule breaking right now. There's a hierarchy in that you should not be talking. Whatever is asked of you, you do. You don't question. Okay, so that's the way the normal rehearsal goes, or in most dance classes go. And I remember a rehearsal where I was supposed to be standing in the front line of the corps de ballet because I'm pretty short, so I'm usually in the front of the line, and I set everything that goes behind me. And the woman had given me a correction, which I had done successfully, but then she had changed her mind and then said something to the effect that I was stupid, something to the effect of that. And I said, "Excuse me, say that again." And then she said, "Okay, here's the beeps. She said, "Don't question me, you bitch."
Wow.
And I had a moment. I said, "Don't ever talk to me." Like, because I was dancing at that moment. I would never do that outside of a rehearsal room. And even though we're trained to be, let's say, compliant. But I was feeling so good in that piece, in that piece of dance, where I felt empowered to talk back, and I did. And she kicked me out of the room, and all of the other dancers followed me. And that was such a liberating moment because we were all feeling good. We were all feeling powerful. And this is really like in a if you have to think about it, like a bunch of teenage girls to get together and not talk about that, but just to say, "Hey, no, this doesn't work for us." It wouldn't happen outside of the dance world, outside of feeling powerful in that moment, because that's not how we're trained.
Wow.
Does that make
Yes,
sense?
absolutely. And that's so powerful, right? Like, I often wondered, one of the things that I love about being in a group, right, and dancing and not just being alone in my room is how connected you feel with one another. And it sounds like that connection, that embodied connection permeated and it went beyond just the choreography, right? There was a banding together of all of you and you walked out. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and that that sort of that sort of togetherness of feeling powerful, feeling yeah, like you can overcome adversity, or that resilience is, it's not just about the piece that's there, but it's something that we have to cultivate over and over and over again, because the dance world is really arduous. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you stood up for that because what I really appreciate about the environment and the culture that you've created at your studio is that everyone has the permission to be who they are. Not just the permission, but they're actively celebrated, right? You talk about the authenticity of movement and how it's about individual expression and giving people the space. And I think that creates a different sort of it has a different impact on people. And could you maybe speak to a little bit more of that philosophy of authenticity of movement and how you create it?
So the way that we teach movement here is a lot different from maybe other studios, because I don't think that, let me say it this way. We give people room to create shapes on their own body. A lot of different places will have an idea of a shape. Say it, for our listeners, say it's something more familiar like a warrior pose in yoga, or a tree pose, or something that's more universally known, right? Um, a lot of different places will put you into the shape of what it is. And there's a preconceived idea of what that shape needs to look like. And then we try to fit our bodies into there. We try as much as possible to leave more room for interpretation of whatever we're doing. So I won't go around and do these mini little corrections on people, because that's not authentic for them. It's more about finding your way of your interpretation of whatever I'm saying, because that's just as valuable as what I do, as my idea of something that's aesthetic. And finding that freedom, no, let's say it this way: you having to make a choice to put your body in that way is empowering. Because once I go in there and I start moving you into something, then it takes away your power to make a good decision. Instead, I leave the freedom for you to say, hey, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to do, maybe I raise my arms up a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Maybe my shoulders are feeling uncomfortable, so I'll try this. So having a little bit more freedom in there then makes it yours. And that practice becomes something that, that you can look forward to every day, because you're not having to create a different shape. Like we all have to show up at work. We all have to show, there's a million different duties that we have. And experiencing those little moments of freedom and autonomy, I think are in movement is really special.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I was thinking, because you mentioned work, right? There's, of course,
Yeah.
parallels that I can draw from this to the workplace, where you actually have a lot of research that shows that when you give people the autonomy to shape their jobs, they have they have more engagement, they have more energy, they contribute at a higher level, right? And it's about, and this is where I see that connection, right? It's not about letting people just go ahead and do whatever they want to and possibly injuring themselves in the process, right? It's about explaining
Right.
what are you trying to work at, like giving the, I love that you give the reasoning behind, hey, you should be feeling this muscle, like that's what we're trying to work on right now, or this is like the point of the movement, and now you do it in your own way. And that's akin to sort of leaders explaining the why, what are we working towards, and setting the vision, but then trusting their people enough to work towards it in the best way possible.
Yeah. So exactly, it's that, like, maybe the design, right? The structural design of your workplace is I'm doing it a different way in my movement classes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's a little bit scary, right? So there's a lot of trust that has to be on both ends of it. So in here in a movement place, I trust that, because I'm teaching adults in this capacity, I trust that people are going to make good decisions for their body, because they're adults and they know their bodies really well. Same thing, like your workplaces will have to trust that you're making decisions that are, appropriate to whatever goals they are. But in there, you have to sort of experiment around and see if we could get to that place. And there might be a little bit too much or a little bit too little, but we have to then find the happy medium in there. And that's the same thing with movement. If I say, okay, we're going to balance on one leg with your eyes closed, you're going to fall over a couple times, and that's okay for me. I don't need to protect you and hold your hands when you're doing it, because, you know, 99 times out of 100, everything's going to be fine. You're not going to injure yourself in there. But having that freedom of being a little bit, it gets to be a little bit scary in there. But I set up a place where you can start to practice that and trust it and try it out and know that you'll be fine, you know?
Yeah. And you need that little bit of challenge, right? It cannot just be about even play, actually. If you look at play, it's also having to have a little challenge. It's not interesting for people if they're just passively engaged in something, right? There needs to be some sort of active engagement and challenge for people to derive some pleasure out of it and or learning out of it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So there's got to be rules to the game, or else it's
Yeah.
not a game. It's just chaos. So we like it, and that goes the same though for everything. So it's the games, it's the way that we design our movement classes, the way that you're designing your workplaces and stuff. There's got to be a little bit of structure that's in there that allows for the freedom. I understand that most workplaces won't have dance as part of their, as part of their daily practice. And that is absolutely fine. But all cultures that I know of have dance as a part of their ancestry. All cultures. Like we all have, wherever we're coming from, we all have had a ritualized form of movement together. And I think it's so interesting how we've gotten away from that. And we were talking like, I haven't been to like a dance club in a long time. I haven't done that. That used to be something that I really enjoyed, but for however many years that wasn't accepted. Like we have the awkward dance at a wedding. We have we have, maybe you'll jam out in your car a little bit, and just bop your head and move your arms and stuff, but that still feels awkward. And I do think it's because we're getting so far away from that physicality. And just like you're saying, it's like your your workplace has hired you for your intellect, not because of your body, which is also, yes, yes. But your intellect and your body are also combined in the same thing. So, like, I was teaching a person who had some back issues, and he was new to movement, and it wasn't that long ago, and I had asked him to move his arm behind him, and he said my arm doesn't do that. I'm like, yeah, of course your arm just. And he tried it again, and he couldn't figure out how to move his arm behind him, and he said, no, that's impossible. And I told him, it's like, this is part of your human body, because he was an able-bodied person. You absolutely can do that. But because he was so focused in his job on the 1 meter that's in front of him, that he had lost all movement in his shoulders. He couldn't even rotate from side to side and could barely turn his head from side to side because he's so focused on just straight in front of him, working virtually and producing intellect front. And that to me was terrifying for him as well. Once he realized, like, no, that's like you've lost it. We'll get it back, but that's crazy, and he's not alone.
That is crazy, and it's crazy because you're totally right. Like when you're in the workplace, most organizations are concerned with profits and revenues and moving forward and moving quickly, being first to market, and it's all about that forward movement, right? And you
Yeah,
miss quite a bit of the picture when you're not looking left and right. And one of the things, and I so resonate with you saying that, hey, it's the mind and body is completely connected, because one of the things that I found is when we're doing strategy work, right, and you're working with these senior leaders, and we have to set the vision and the strategy for the company. If they're feeling rushed, unsafe, anxious about something, and they are, um, yeah, they're just in a fearful state of mind, we cannot do an envisioning exercise because also physically, right? Physically, you're not able to see the big picture. Your visual field is sort of narrowed when you're in a space of unsafety and you're feeling psychologically unsafe. So your visual systems and your psyche are so connected, right? Of course, there is a connection between your mind and your body. And to get people out of that and really look at the big picture, you also have to work with their minds and then, make them feel safe, connected. You have to, I often send people out for a walk if the weather is nice, right? Just go for a walk and think about this question rather than sitting here in a room and pondering over it. Just because the act of movement actually frees up some parts of your brain to think about different things, right? That you wouldn't when you're sitting. And there are actually studies that show that. And I just I find it really frustrating that the prevailing narrative of, hey, you're hired for your intellect and what your brain produces is so limiting when we know that there are benefits of using your whole body and being a whole person at work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your I think actually that the more movement that we can bring back into work, into the workplace, I think that better ideas are going to come out of it. I think there is going to be more innovative, more authentic, more everything because of unlocking this creativity that we have. And it comes through that movement. And it's also just like you're saying, like we all have these, we all have traumas, we all have triggers, we all have those things, and getting through them, past them, through our movement, then will I don't know, like give you different impulses. Do you feel like that?
Definitely. I actually, since I started coming to the studio, I actually started doing my brainstormings after I come back from the studio by myself. I actually prepare for the next day because I find that my mind is just working at a different pace after just doing something energizing like a bar class, right? Like you just feel different. You have different access, and there is a lot of research that shows even when you look at creativity, right? That it comes from engaging with movement as well. There are studies that show that if you're involved in either some sort of unstructured play or movement, it actually has an impact on the ideas that you generate in the workplace. So there's also a business case for it, right? But the interesting thing is that it cannot just be sort of inserted into your rigid workplace, right? You cannot just decide that, you know what, you have no autonomy in your job and everything sucks, but once a day as a company, we decide to have a dance party and hope that things are going to magically change. No, that's not going to work.
Yeah. No, no. Oh God, that would be awful. That would be actually I think that sounds so awkward and so shame inducing somehow in there. Before I say this, I think that we also need to be mindful always of accessibility, right? So, like, depending on the people that are meeting in, depending on the coworkers, that everyone is being seen and taken care of appropriately. So any activity that you're doing is accessible for them. So just putting that to, of course, that's always going to be in the forefront. But having meetings when you're going out for a walk, that would be a great way of doing it. Having coming in and doing a structured improvisation with someone, and then going into a strategy session where your brain needs to be at the forefront, but because you've unlocked this idea, as a group of people, might be super interesting. Maybe it is doing something that is so left field for a group of people, like you're going to learn how to hula hoop. I mean, just something, like something that's way off base, that might just be enough silliness and enough fun where we don't need to take it too far serious, that it helps unlock these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those ideas. I'm actually going to bring that one. I think it's time I bring the hula hoop to one of my workshops. So if anyone's listening, it's Hannah's fault.
I'm so sorry. I can't hula hoop.
Neither can I, but it will be fun to try. All right. Okay, Hannah, as we are bringing this conversation to a close, what is your message to the people listening? What would be, if you had a call for action, what would be that?
Oh gosh. Um, that it is worth taking the time for you to be in your bodies, however that looks like for you. Movement is essential, not only for your health, but it's also for your brain and for your soul, your emotions, all of that. So finding a movement method that works for you, whether it's taking a walk in the morning or doing some yoga or Pilates, it doesn't even really matter what it is. And I'm not talking about doing fitness for that sake. I'm just talking about moving in a way that feels good for you. If you could do that, even 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, I promise that the benefits will last an entire lifetime.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I certainly, I see that and I see the changes that I have experienced myself since I made movement a very conscious, intentional part of my day, as opposed to just, hoping it would happen when I'm running to the supermarket. And it makes a huge difference. So thank you for saying that. And before we wrap up, Hannah, I want you to also complete this sentence for us. When I drop my armor, dot, dot, dot.
I dance like no one's
Oh, yes,
watching.
I was hoping you'd say that.
You led me to that one.
No, I think I just know you now a little bit better. I love that. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here.